crazies. He called them all crazy. I said, they weren't crazy. They were great Americans. These people, if you would have seen these people, I know what crazy is. I know all about crazies. These weren't crazy. So he insulted me, and he insulted everybody in that room. And I said, somebody should run against John McCain, who has been, in my opinion, not so hot. And I supported him. I supported him for president. I raised $1 million for him. It's a lot of money. I supported him. He lost. He let us down. But, he lost. So I never liked him as much after that, because I don't like losers. But Frank, let me get to it. He hit me. He's not a war hero.
He's a war hero.
He's a war hero.
5.5 years.
He's a war hero because he was captured. I like people that weren't captured, okay? I hate to tell you.
Do you agree with that?
He's a war hero because he was captured, okay? You can have, and I believe perhaps he's a war hero, but
July 2015, that's Donald J. Trump at a Christian conference on stage when he had the audacity to be asked about John McCain criticizing him. And that's how he responded. The whole bit's about 2.5 minutes long, where he goes on and on. But the whole thing comes down to one thing and one thing only, that John McCain had the audacity to criticize Donald Trump. And what did Trump say? Trump said he's a war hero because he was captured. And I like people who weren't captured. Now, look. Everybody who tries to spin that moment, they try to say, hey, look, he really wasn't attacking POWs, Fred. He was just attacking John McCain. And, John McCain, blah, 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 blah. You see that from the MAGA types. No, his words are exactly what he said. I like people who weren't captured. Because Donald Trump's never served. Donald Trump's never served anybody but himself. Now, look, we've seen that video before here on the show, and we've been talking for the last couple of weeks. As you can see, I am on the road still in a hotel room. This time I'm coming for you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm still on tour with the VoteVets, Not a Sucker or a Loser bus tour. And so we're going to kind of do a combined episode, a meeting of minds. We're going to have On Democracy, Midas Touch, and VoteVets all in one place. It's exciting. I'll be pitching a little to VoteVets, pitching our friends at Midas Touch, pitching the On Democracy. It's like a crossover episode you never knew you wanted, but here we are. And so why am I doing a crossover episode on this third on the road one for you? Well, the first one we talked about January 6th. We talked about not forgetting January 6th, letting the memory hold January 6th. Number two, we talked about the other terrible things that Donald J. Trump did in the latter part of his presidency, including pardons for his friends, including Medal of Honor or Medal of Freedoms for his friends, and all those things. But then this third one for the road is kind of the finale of what I've been on the road about. Let's talk about all of Donald Trump's disrespect and hatred for the military. And I bring it up because I've been talking about it for 2 weeks on the road here. As a matter of fact, we even had a press conference on the steps of the Pennsylvania State Capitol the other day, which is really cool. I got to talk. Check out that cool picture. I got to talk to some great folks. We had some political activists show up and help us out. We live streamed it on the VoteVets channels, and it was a lot of fun. But, talk about just this topic, right? Which is the idea that Donald Trump has a long history of disrespecting the military. And what's gotten twisted in the last 9 years is, since that moment, especially from July of 2015, is this idea that he actually loves the troops. Oh, he loves the troops. He supports. He always talks about the troops, how much he loves the troops. The troops love him. And he's played on the fact that, let's be honest, the military is a very conservative bent. We always have been. It's a family business. It's being more so. There is a movement, for those who don't know, that the military itself has actually become more progressive and much more of a reflection of our society since the global war on terror started. We had a lot of young kids come in during the global war on terror who came in because they saw us doing good things, like me, building schools and clinics, and they wanted to be a part of that. So the military itself is much more progressive than people know. The perfect example, if you've forgotten, is that when Don't Ask, Don't Tell ended, I mean, honestly, all the generals and the senior officers were convinced that when Don't Ask, Don't Tell went away, when we allowed gay service members to serve openly without any fucking reservations, it would be the end of the military. And a lot of us who said, no, I know this generation of service members, they're not going to care. And we were right. When that thing ended, it wasn't even a blip. I mean, everybody knew who the gay service members were already. The only people who didn't know was the generals, right? And so That's what I say a lot is the military itself has become much more progressive. Now, veterans world, not as much. We're still pretty split. If you look at last vote, I think it was 53% for Trump, and then 38% were for Biden, with that growing with independents that voted, but it's definitely becoming. We here at VoteVets, on the work I'm doing right now, estimate that our studies showed that Trump lost 16% of the veterans vote during the last cycle. So from 2016 to 2020, 16% less voted, which is a pretty big change in one community if you think about it, especially a community that's famous for being pretty conservative. So that's what we're going to talk about today from the road, our last road show. I'll be back in St. Louis next week. I'll be doing it back in the studio. We'll get back to having some guests and mixing it up a bit. But I got to tell you, you guys have been great and supportive for my trip here. But we've had some really fun events and some fun conversations, and we'll get more of those in today, I hope. But in the meantime, let's just get on with the show. I want to talk about Trump's longtime dislike of the military and what that means to all of us. Oh, yeah. Okay. You caught me dancing. I'm in a hotel room alone, so I get to dance to music. Man, welcome back to the show. I never went anywhere. I was sitting right here that whole time. But nonetheless, here we are. So let's talk about the veteran. And I'll talk a little bit about what I've been doing for the last couple weeks. As I mentioned, you may have seen this video last week. Check out this video. So we started in New York City, and then we followed JD Vance to a fundraiser down in Virginia Beach, Virginia. This is his convoy, his little vice presidential nominee convoy, going by our bus from the VoteVets Not a Suckers or Losers tour. Slow motion, baby. My partner in crime, Mike Levine, is the master of the slow motion video. He captured that as JD Vance went by. There's more of those videos. I'll show you some pictures too. What is VoteVets? Who don't know, you've heard me say the name a couple of times. I realized I hadn't really told you. VoteVets represents over almost 2 million veterans, military families, their civilian supporters across all 50 states. Founded over 18 years ago by a guy named John Soltz and his buddy Les, and they're all veterans. Our group, the group advocates for responsible military policy that goes to, only goes to war when necessary as a last resort, guarantees that veterans and their families are taken care of when they're at home. VoteVets endorses veterans, military family members, national security professionals at all levels. I mean, I think we have over 400 candidates they've endorsed below the congressional level this cycle, at state, local, and level. So they're really reaching out at this point, and they really want to be the voice of those who serve as sacrifice have a voice on impact, on policy, and other things. They've spent over $45 million this cycle to elect veterans and defeat those who, like Donald Trump, who aggressively, court our enemies. That's why I wanted to tour with these guys. That's why I wanted to tour with this. I host a show on their network called Online with VoteVets. You should check it out. You should follow VoteVets at VoteVets, all their places. But we've been talking about veterans for 2 weeks and the veterans issues. And we've gone around the country. Like I said, I mentioned we had that press conference in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. But let's talk a little bit about, Donald Trump and his longtime disdain for veterans. Yeah, and look, this goes all the way back, guys. If you know the history, and some of you may know this already, and hopefully you'll find some things you've never heard before. But either way, I want to remind you and I want to arm you. We stopped in Scranton, Pennsylvania the other day, and we stopped to take some pictures of the bus on the side of the road, and had a chance to talk to a nice lady on the side of the road. And she goes, I don't like Trump, but I don't like Harris and Biden either. And I had an opportunity to say, well, look, here's my perspective as a veteran of the two presidencies and vice presidencies, the two administrations, if you will, and the differences. And I said, look, Donald Trump's never really respected us in any way. And it goes all the way back to him skipping Vietnam. Now, this is a young man who played collegiate tennis in college, and got college deferments for the draft because of that. But when he graduated and he couldn't have those deferments anymore, he got a doctor to say he had bone spurs. Now, how do you play varsity tennis for 4 years and then develop bone spurs that give you an F rating, keep you from going to the military? And he skipped the military. He skipped Vietnam, making other men go in his place. And, but the thing is, what makes it really disgusting and really, really disgusting, this is he joked about not going to Vietnam for years. Here he is on the Howard Stern show back in the 90s, or I think it was the 80s, joking about how, well, Just watch. This is Donald Trump's perspective on his Vietnam.
Dating, right? And when you got to say to a woman, hey, listen, you got to go to my personal doctor and I'm going to have you checked out. Is that a tough thing to say to a woman, or you just got the balls to say it?
You know, I'll tell you, it's amazing. I can't even believe it. I've been so lucky.
Right.
In terms of that whole world.
You've never gotten a social disease.
It is a dangerous world out there. It is. Scary. It's like Vietnam, sort of like, the Vietnam era.
It is your personal Vietnam, isn't it?
It is my personal
It is. You've said that many times.
Like a great and very brave soldier.
Feels like a great and very brave soldier because, he avoided STDs, in the 80s and 90s in New York City. And he's still bragging about this day how that was his he felt like a very brave and great soldier because he never caught an STD. And that's Donald Trump. And that morph, that flame of thinking he's brave, that flame of thinking he matters didn't end just then, right? It didn't just end, even later when he tried to become, when he was president, he used to joke a lot about how, we saw him smearing John McCain. Now John McCain spent 5 years in captivity. Okay. He was tortured to the point he couldn't raise his arms above his shoulders because the amount of time he was tortured with his hanging by his arms behind his back, But Trump really wanted Purple Heart. Years ago, and then again recently, an actual veteran, a Vietnam veteran, gave him a Purple Heart. And that's fine. You want to be a MAGA supporter. Like, I'm not going to criticize a fellow veteran for that, their belief. But one of our most sacred medals, and this is what Donald Trump said about getting that sacred medal, that all-important medal that so few of us get, that is held in high regard. There's an entire Medal of Honor, or Medal of Purple Heart Society dedicated to the Purple Heart, the military or the Purple Heart's called. And this is Donald Trump about getting his own Purple Heart from a veteran.
And he said, that's my real Purple Heart. I have such confidence in you. And I said, man, that's like big stuff. I always wanted to get the Purple Heart. This was much easier. Yeah, it was much easier because he never served a day. And he got another one the other day for a veteran in Fayetteville, North Carolina, while we were outside stalking the event. Matter of fact, I have video. This is us outside with our bus outside of the Trump. This is kind of fun. Again, slow motion again, passing the Trump rally in Fayetteville, North Carolina, which was billed as a veterans town hall and hosted by none other than Anna Paulina Luna, who was sort of thrown out of the Air Force. And by the way, while just after hurricane hit her district in Florida, and before a second hurricane was hitting her district, Anna Paulina Luna had time to fly to Fayetteville, North Carolina, to host a town hall with Trump. But anyway, this is us outside that very same town hall where he got his second Purple Heart. Slow motion again, kind of says it out. The gentleman didn't even notice. That was like our third pass around that rally. But that's who he is. He wanted to get it. This is a man who, when he was attacked by the Khans, so if you guys remember during the campaign, the Khan family lost their son, who was an immigrant, the family of an immigrant, when he stopped an IED from killing some of the soldiers, a vehicle-borne IED. And when the Khans had the audacity to criticize Donald Trump, he attacked them. And that was again when as president, when Maisha Johnson, when 4 soldiers were killed in Africa, and he called the widow in her car and couldn't remember her husband's name, and then went on to say, well, he knew this was going to happen. He signed up for this. And when she got upset about it, they actually attacked her and her Congress member from the podium of the White House, attacking Gold Star families. A lot of people forget that Donald Trump blamed Gold Star families for giving him COVID. And this is a story I dug up when I worked at the Lincoln Project. When he got COVID, it was actually the day after, or 2 days after, the Amy Coney Barrett nomination event they had in the Rose Garden of the White House with no masking procedures. Well, he also had an event with Gold Star families the next day. And it wasn't very publicized. We actually dug up the pictures for it from my organization on their Flipboard page, where they put all their photos.
And if you remember when Donald Trump was in the hospital, when he got sick, in the press conference, he said, I can't help it. The police and the soldiers, they just hug me. They love me. What's funny about that, too, is you can see in the photos they were kept at a distance from him. No one hugged or fucked. And by the way, nobody hugs Donald Trump. Okay. That's a fantasy in his head. Like he had an audience at the debate the other day. Okay. But he blamed military families for giving them COVID. Not the people that were at the Supreme Court justice nomination, where they had a private reception indoors with no mask, where they had hundreds of people at the White House, by the way, and dozens of them ended with COVID after that. No, he didn't blame those important people. He didn't blame his own distinct supporters and his rich friends and his elected officials. No, when Donald Trump thought he got COVID, instead of blaming the people who also had COVID, no, he blamed military families and Gold Star families for that. That's who Donald Trump really, really is. And it goes on. He attacked his own staff during his campaign. So this came out. There's a couple of things here that came out in that story. Let's look up the hell. If you guys remember, so I remember distinctly because it was Labor Day weekend of 2020. I was on an airplane flying to Park City, Utah for a weekend with my now fiance, and we were flying off, and the story came out in the Atlantic from Jeffrey Goldberg, if you remember this one. That's the Atlantic. Trump, Americans who died in war are suckers and losers. And it says, if you can read it, the president has repeatedly disparaged the intelligence of service members and asked that they wounded veterans kept on the military parade. So there's a number of things that came out in the story who has been verified by other sources since. So one of the things that MAGA try to get you guys to do, and I'm telling you all this so you have it. They're going to get you to say, "Oh, it didn't happen. That's been debunked. Oh, look, Snopes said that wasn't true." No, it has been confirmed, especially the suckers and losers comments, because that was said directly to General Kelly, and General Kelly has gone on the record since then to confirm it. He went on with CNN later and confirmed it on the record that Donald Trump said those things to him about the fact that, like, for example, they had a wounded warrior. There's a well-known wounded warrior who is still in the military in a wheelchair who used to sing the national anthem at events. He did that one time under Trump, and then Trump told him he never wanted to see him again because, quote, nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see the wounded guys. Okay. Think about that. Okay. That same story he talked about. He didn't want to go to the cemetery in France because his hair would get wet, but he said, nobody wants to go see these guys. All the guys in that cemetery are suckers. He asked General Kelly one day in Section 60 at Arlington, where he had that clown show later. If you remember this stupid clown show where he showed up in Arlington. Yeah, just recently, if you remember the Arlington debacle. Well, when he went to Arlington with General Kelly, whose son is buried in Section 60, he said, I don't get it. I don't get it why these people do this. What's in it for them? Right? Because in Donald Trump's world, the only thing that matters is what's in it for you. What is the value to the person? And that means money. I mean, in Donald Trump's world, there's only one thing that matters. It's money. It's power and money. And power is only good because it gets you more money. If you're not making money, you're not doing anything worthwhile in his world, right? And so he went on, and he said in that story that he didn't believe that he believed they were suckers and losers. He believed that it was all just a joke that they served, all right? And that's who he is. He didn't go to the ceremony, and then he went on, and then continued to smear our service, okay, for years. And he still does to this day, if you remember. Okay, so let's talk about a little bit about that. Let's see what else. He's said many times that he just doesn't believe that what we do matters. Under his presidency, if you remember, he took out the Iranian general, the terrorist general, if you will, Soleimani. He took him out. We took him out with a Hellfire missile in Baghdad, Iraq. And the Iranians responded with a barrage of missiles to our bases in Iraq at the time. Huge missiles, by the way. These are Scud missiles. They weren't small. And the explosions were deafening. And it injured a number of soldiers with traumatic brain injury. I want to talk about this quite a bit. And this is a really important bit we talk about here because TBI is a big deal. And it does cause long-term injury to soldiers. I have known people. I did an event. I'll tell you guys a story. I did an event with Home Depot when I used to work with a veterans advocate. And we took about 100 volunteers from the Home Depot out to the desert in Arizona about, probably 12 years ago now. And a young man there had traumatic brain injury, was his main injury. I'll never forget it. His wife and he had two small toddlers, and they had a house in the desert. But his traumatic brain injury meant He could barely leave his home during the day in the sun because the brightness of the sun gave him headaches. Loud noises hurt him. His cognitive ability was many times reduced to the level of a toddler. I remember distinctly talking to the president of the Home Depot Foundation at the time, and we were watching the work unfold. And the story just gets me. And she turned to me and she said, is his wife happy with her work? She doesn't seem happy, you know. And we looked over and she was sitting there and she had a baby on her hip. And her husband at the time, the veteran who had been blown up pretty significantly in Iraq with traumatic brain injury, was wandering around. And he insisted on hugging all of our volunteers and thanking them for fixing up his house. And they were doing a lot. They were putting in they actually were putting in a shaded porch in the back so he could go outside in the shade and enjoy his house. They were painting, they were doing landscaping. And he insisted on hugging all of our volunteers. And I said to my colleague, my friend, my client, I said, no, look at her eyes. Watch her where she's looking. And what was going on was she was watching her husband like a hawk. She had 3 kids. And because of his traumatic brain injury, because the rattling of the brain, and what a TBI is, when we talk about traumatic brain injury, it's not a concussion. It's not from getting your head hit. It's not from not wearing a helmet. These large explosions of these huge bombs, these huge missiles, and these IEDs that we dealt with over there, the sound waves are so big, they rattle the brain inside the skull. This isn't from like being knocked. It's not concussed. You see a lot of people say, oh, it's concussion. It's actually worse than concussion. This is literally the brain matter being rattled. The sound waves penetrating the soft material of your brain, going through your brain and damaging your brain. It's not like a concussion. It's worse. And it took us years to define this. It's a very, very serious injury. And it took us years to recognize it as an injury that deserved a Purple Heart. So watch that. Now you've heard the story of those, and this is the signature wound of our war. It wasn't people, if you ever thought it was people getting their limbs blown off, and that's true. But for many, many people, we agree that traumatic brain injury, TBI, is the signature wound of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, especially Iraq, from all the bombs that were going off all the time, from my own organization when we got mortared. I remember being the rockets pounding their way towards my bunker and then going past my bunker, just holding your breath that they would go past you and they missed you. And the explosions and rattling, knocking everything off the walls and rattling you. I experienced that a number of times. This at the time Donald Trump dismissed it, and to this day he dismisses it. Back to our topic of Donald Trump. This is what happened just recently when Trump was asked about these injuries under his command as the commander-in-chief.
Do you think Israel should retaliate to these missile attacks from Iran? But also, do you believe that you should have been tougher on Iran after they had launched ballistic missiles in 2020 on U.S. forces in Iraq, leaving more than 100 U.S. soldiers injured?
So, first of all, injured. What does injured mean? Injured means you mean because they had a headache, because the bombs never hit the fort. So just so you understand, there was nobody ever tougher in Iraq. They had no money with me. They would have made any deal with me. I would have had a deal made within 1 week after the election. They were dying to make a deal. And when you say not tough, they had no money. They had no money for Hamas. They had no money for Hezbollah. And when we hit them, they hit us. And they called us. And they said, we're going to shoot at your fort, but we're not going to hit it. And if you were a truthful reporter, which you're not, you would tell the following: none of those very accurate missiles hit our fort. They all hit outside. And there was nobody hurt other than the sound. It was loud. And some people said that hurt, and I accept that.
If you're like me, you understand the pain of finding out what to wear each day. I mean, most clothes I have are uncomfortable, never actually the size I really am, and not to mention how much time is wasted trying to find a good outfit. And when you do have a good fit, you can only wear it for a few hours. We have to change for an important meeting or dinner, find a new outfit. Now, everyone wants to dress well at all times because, simply put, it's a confidence booster, even for men like me. Men's closets were due for a radical overhaul and reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man, and here's why. Rhone helps you get ready for any occasion with the community collection, which offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, quarter zips, and polos. You've never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Rhone commuter collection. With Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll be smelling fresh and clean all day long. And on top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can just ditch it all in the dry cleaner or ditch the dry cleaner completely, put it all in your own washing machine yourself. You know, I'm obsessed with the Rhone commuter collection. We're on the move a lot, whether it's I'm catching a flight or I'm going to a meeting or whatever. The Rhone commuter collection has never let me down so far. The commuter collection get you through any workday and straight into whatever comes next. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to head to Rhone.com/Fred. Use promo code Fred to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/Fred and use code Fred. It's time for you to find your corner office of comfort. Check out our sponsor, Rhone. I hope you'll buy some outfits today.
Okay, first of all, it's not a fucking fort, okay? Donald Trump, commander-in-chief for 4 years, still doesn't understand we don't live on fucking forts. This isn't F Troop, okay? It was a forward operating base, a FOB, okay? FOB, not fort. My God, my grandmother got that, okay? It's not a fucking fort. Second, those bombs very much landed on the FOBs. They cratered the runways. They destroyed a number of hangars and buildings. And the service members were hiding in bunkers. Yeah, they were warned. They knew the missiles were coming because our shit works. We knew they were coming. And they weren't just fucking headaches. And I get so angry watching that clip. This guy wanted to be commander-in-chief. This guy wants to be commander-in-chief again. He still can't even get the most basic military terminology right. And he dismisses the injuries that were caused by his actions. 65 service members died under Donald Trump's leadership as commander-in-chief. 65. Okay? They love going on and on about the 13 in Afghanistan under President Biden. Biden hasn't even had a half the service member die under his command that Trump did in 4 years. And let's talk about that. Let's talk about the famous picture of Biden looking at his watch, where he wasn't. He was looking at the rosary. Bo's rosary on his wrist was what he was looking at. But let's talk about Trump going to visit Dover, because Trump also lost service members. So let's talk about the very first act that Donald Trump had as commander-in-chief. So just days after taking over the White House, Trump was presented a plan by the special operations by DOD to approve a raid into Yemen to take out a terrorist leader. I won't go into the details, but the idea was to fly our CV-22s, the Ospreys in there with SEALs, grab this guy, take him out, either kidnap him, kill him, get out. President Obama turned the raid down because it was high risk. Yemen was still, this is before the really civil war broken out. There was a lot of risk in the mission. He didn't want to cause any, there was just issues. When Trump came into office, as soon as he heard Obama turned it down, he goes, yeah, let's do it. Yeah, I'm tough guy. So he sends the raid in. Sure enough, it goes awry, as sometimes these raids do. And a CV-22 was lost. And a Navy SEAL was lost. Okay? I believe Ryan Neal was his name. He was lost. Okay? 9 children were killed, including one who was technically an American citizen. Okay? This raid went horribly awry. When that SEAL's body was returned to Dover, Trump was going to play president. He was going to go. So Trump goes to Dover. And what happens? Well, the dad of that SEAL chews his ass. Like, gave it to him about approving the raid and blaming him for getting his son killed. Okay. Trump skipped Dover for 2 years. He sent Pence instead for 2 years. It's all documented. MAGA's going to lie to you, say it's not true. It's true. Donald Trump had 65 servicemen get killed. He talks about they smear Biden for going to Dover that one time. Trump skipped it for 2 years because he got yelled at. And I know for a fact, I witnessed it. At Fort Campbell, Kentucky in 2004, when George Bush was the president. And I escorted him for the day at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, after we returned to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, after our first tour in Iraq. And Mr. Bush had a tradition, Mr. and Mrs. Bush, when they visited a military fort or base, I used a fort because it was actually Fort Campbell. When he visited a fort or an Air Force base or whatever, when he visited Fort Campbell, they had us line up all of our Gold Star families and widows in the post hospital at Fort Campbell, about 10 to 15 apart. And we had a couple dozen. Sorry. And George Bush went through and met with every single family. I stayed outside, but I remember they had 2 White House photographers that day. And the reason they had 2 is because they had to rotate in and out. Because the photographer would come in and take pictures and become so overcome by emotions of President and Mrs. Bush meeting these families. Some of them chewed his ass. Like, he's told that story before of getting his ass chewed and blamed for sending these service members to war. And he got his ass chewed for it. He did. I know for a fact, at least one of our families from Campbell were very angry at him. Okay? He kept doing it. He kept doing it. They had to rotate photographers because it was so emotional. But George and Mrs. Bush met them all. Donald Trump gets his ass chewed one time, and skips Dover for 2 years. 2 years. And here's the punchline of the whole story, the most disgusting part. He's at the White House. He's got John Voight visiting, the actor. You all know who John Voight is now. He's the big Trumpy guy, and he's gone off the rails in his 80s. John Voight was there visiting. I think he was getting an award. I think he got a Medal of Freedom. Anyway, Trump hears there's a dignified return coming at Dover and invites John Voight to go with him to Dover to meet these returning service members' remains like it's a fucking tourist stop. Another time after that, he was flying back from Florida from a rally and stopped his plane at Dover with Matt Gaetz and a bunch of donors and supporters and other elected officials to see the dignified return, like a tourist stop. So every time they complained about Joe Biden looking at his watch, supposedly, when he was actually looking at his rosary, at one snapshot, remember, Donald Trump skipped Dover for 2 years because he's a fucking coward. And then, of course, just last month, they had this stunt at Arlington where they went in there and they planned it. They coordinated with the families of the guys who fell in Afghanistan. Not all the families, but 2 of the families. They went to Arlington to have a private wreath-laying memorial, which is legal. There's 3,000 of those a year. 3,000 private wreath layings at Arlington a year. Not all of them are official. President, the first lady, and the vice president go to the ones that are official. Memorial Day, Veterans Day. She's been there in the rain. I've shown you that picture before. He goes with these families, and the rule was simple. You cannot conduct campaign activity on Arlington National Cemetery, period. Yes, you've seen pictures of Biden. You've seen pictures of Rhone. You've seen pictures of Bush at Arlington. That's because those were official events, official photos. They can use those official photos later in ads, all they want. Matter of fact, Donald Trump could right now do an ad with his photos of him laying a wreath at Arlington for Veterans Day, being there for Memorial Day. Those are legal, but you can't actually go there to run a commercial for an ad. I'm not going to show you the one they did because the next day, sure enough, they added this inspiring music video on TikTok, a campaign ad that they filmed at Arlington. And of course, as I showed you already, this damn picture, standing over a grave with this stupid thumbs up, the grave, trampling on the graves of other service members who didn't want to be a part of this, whose family wanted no part of Donald Trump's stunt. But they didn't care. They took their pictures. That's what Donald Trump thinks of us, okay? That's what he thinks of those of us who have served. So when you hear people saying, oh, he loves the troops, he wants to support them, that lies. The truth is, his plans for this next administration are even more dastardly than last time. Starting with, we told you about Schedule F in our last video last week. He already put Schedule F in place. The idea of kicking out thousands and thousands of professional government employees just because of their political affiliation, or it's a job they want to place a MAGA affiliate or a acolyte into position. Thousands of veterans will lose their jobs because thousands of veterans are government employees, thanks to a very generous system that allows the civil service system that allows veterans to have extra points to get those jobs. At the VA, you're talking doctors, you're talking the mental health professionals we've desperately wanted. Hey, look, let's be honest. A lot of social workers are kind of liberal. How many of the social workers can get fired because they donated to a Democratic candidate at some point? Social workers we desperately need to take care of my brothers and sisters right now. That's the threat of Donald Trump in real time. If he goes back into the White House, I forgot. Oh, shit. I forgot one. I forgot where he compared the Medal of Honor to the Medal of Freedom. Okay. it's always something with him where he's looking for something to say, something awful to compare things to. And, we all see it all the time. And he's done it over and over. And do we really want to put him back in office and allow him to do that yet again? Because that's what we're facing if he does. And I want no part of it. Okay. And you should either. He has no regard for Americans. He has no regard for our service, and he's going to make it worse. And look, I showed you the pictures I think I did actually show you last week that he gave the Medal of Freedom to, of all people. Yeah, here we go. I had it in the file here. Okay. He gave the Medal of Freedom to Jim Jordan after he tried to overelect the election. He gave the Medal of Freedom to Devin Nunes after he tried to overturn the election, who was going to, already at that point, was going to be the head of Truth Social, right? He gave that medal, he gave that important medal to them. And then I did find the clip. Look, I'm actually know what I'm doing, you guys. I'm doing the solo. I hope you understand that. I don't have Matt, so I'm on my own. Here's a video. This is the last one I'm going to show you. And then this is him talking about the Medal of Freedom. You may have seen this.
I have to say, Miriam, I watched Sheldon sitting so proud in the White House when we gave Miriam the Presidential Medal of Freedom. That's the highest award you can get as a civilian. It's the equivalent of the Congressional Medal of Honor, but civilian version. It's actually much better because everyone gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. That's soldiers. They're either in very bad shape because they've been hit so many times by bullets, or they're dead. She gets it, and she's a healthy, beautiful woman. And they're rated equal.
They're not rated equal, okay? They're both very important in their own way. But the Medal of Freedom goes to civilians of note, musicians, artists, actors, sometimes political leaders. Joe Biden got the highest award for it from President Obama at the end of his vice president term, because at that point he'd served public service for 46 years of his life, okay? But this guy gave it to his friends and a donor. That woman he gave it to, Adelson, she's just a donor. She's a big-time donor. And this son of a bitch compares to the Medal of Honor because, you get the Medal of Honor, you've been blown up or killed. Yeah, no shit. We were in Scranton the other day. I don't know if I took pictures of it. I'm not going to try and dig it up. But they had a beautiful Veterans Memorial. And they had the plaque for 4 Lackawanna County veterans who had received the Medal of Honor in World War II. 4 in one county. It's incredible. And they're honored in the town square. Good luck finding an honor in the town square for the Medal of Freedom for Devin freaking Nunes. But that's Trump, and that's who he is. So I wanted to give you guys that. I wanted you to understand. So we're out here on the road. We were just in Philly, in front of Constitution Hall there. We're getting around. We're wrapping the tour up this week for VoteVets. I'd love you to go follow them at VoteVets. I'll probably doing another show later today with my colleague Mike Levine for VoteVets on their channels. If you're probably gonna be too late for this, you won't see it. But we were going to be doing more shows when I get back to St. Louis. I'll be doing more videos of them, focused just on veterans issues, national security issues, people, the candidates are making a difference in our country for that community. It'll be very different than On Democracy. So I'd love you to follow us at VoteVets as well as, of course, here on Democracy. Follow me on Twitter and everywhere else. Of course, follow us on our own YouTube channel and on Midas Touch. But I just wanted to talk to you guys. This is our final. I guess we did a trilogy of videos of me talking at the camera, talking about the things. So let's go back again. Don't let the memory hold January 6th. January 6th was terrible. They want us to forget. We just had the stuff come out from Jack Smith. January 6th is his last major act as president. When people ask you, why do you like Trump? Well, he tried to overthrow our government on January 6th. And there's no doubt about that. When they ask you why I don't like Trump, all the things he did outside of January 6th, those last couple of months, as I mentioned, the Medal of Freedoms, but the pardons for Roger Stone and Mike Flynn, the putting in the nut jobs and cranks into office, the Schedule F trying to fire federal employees who are just doing their jobs, professionals, all the crazy things. And of course, he skipped the inauguration. Okay, first time in 150 years, the president of the United States skipped the inauguration of his successor. That's Donald Trump. His last act of president was one more act of pettiness. And then the third act of the trilogy is what it's about, his hatred for the military, his hatred for veterans, with plenty of documentation showing who he is and what he does and how he thinks about us. So I hope for this trilogy of me talking to the camera while I'm on the road helps you better explain to people the difference. And the final thing I'll say, I'll finish that story I started about the lady in Scranton. And she asked me, she said, Fred, I don't get, why do you, whatever, know my name. She said, why do you support Harris? I said, as a veteran, Donald Trump has a long history of disrespecting our service, a long history of denigrating our service. Humping the flag and saying he loves us is one thing, but his actions say much more. Privatizing our healthcare. Project 2025 will privatize our healthcare more. They'll shorten the amount of time that doctors are allowed to see our veterans. They're going to try and cut our benefits. They're trying to make it so that only service-connected injuries like my bad back will be treated by the VA. But if I get cancer, it's going to have to be from outside the VA. So I'll need health insurance plus my VA disability. All those things are in Project 2025. But here's the final thing. The Biden-Harris administration, and now the Harris-Walz administration will take care of veterans. Aside from the fact that Tim Walz is a veteran himself of honorable service of 24 years in the National Guard, aside from the fact that Tim Walz served in the House Veterans Affairs Committee as the ranking member for years and helped engineer the modern GI Bill and a number of other things, has been called one of the biggest advocates for veterans in Congress at the time, at a very difficult time. Besides from that, you have what the Biden-Harris administration did with passing the PACT Act and fielding it, where 1 million veterans were added to the benefits rolls in just 2 years with very few glitches. People said, first of all, they'd never get the PACT Act passed. They got it passed finally, even after Republicans rejected it. And 146 Republicans voted against it. Excuse me. Even after all that, they passed it. But the real trick was getting implemented. Because people thought, well, it's so big. But they did it. 1 million veterans got benefits. I'm one of them has benefits upgraded thanks to the PACT Act, thanks to the improvements the Biden administration made in the VA. So you can just apply on their website now. You don't have dozens and dozens of piles of paperwork. It's a simple web form now. Those are improvements that have happened for the veterans community under Biden. And the final thing, I don't know if you guys know this, but the one thing that I don't have at the DOD anymore, the DOD does not currently have a guy whose job was to monitor the president's Twitter feed. It's a real thing that happened, you guys. Under Donald Trump, the Department of Defense had an officer and a group that dedicated to monitoring Donald Trump's tweets in case he issued orders to the military via tweet. That's how he issued the transgender ban. When he decided that transgender service members couldn't serve anymore, he issued that by tweet. He fired Secretary Esper, the Secretary of Defense, by tweet. So the DOD had to actually have a person monitoring Twitter. Not orders coming through the system, not even an effing email, tweets. Something the Biden administration doesn't have. So with that, I'll let you go. Great. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope you'll keep following us. You see down here, join our YouTube channel. I'll give you one more plug for my friends at VoteVets, who are great. They pay me to go on this trip. It's been a really cool experience hanging out with them and learning more what the organization does for our veterans and the large number of people who support them around the country. As I mentioned, we're in Pittsburgh right now. We're hanging outside where President Obama spoke last night. We've been all over the state. So follow it at VoteVets. You'll see some live shows there that we do. In the meantime, keep on doing what you do. Stay in the fight. This is 25 days, 26 days to the election. We are in it, folks. Find a campaign to rally. We don't believe the red wave bullshit. Don't believe that there's all these polls coming out. Don't believe them, folks. All the fundamentals say that we're on track. But the key is keeping your motivation, getting out there and volunteering, donating what you can, putting up your signs, wearing your t-shirts. Get in the fight for this last 20 days, and we will win this election and put Donald Trump in our rearview mirrors forever. So I shudder to think what else could happen. With that, thanks for joining us here on Democracy. We will see you again next week. I look forward to it as always. And in the meantime, good luck. Stay in the fight.